So, what if I told you that building your financial future, it's actually a lot less about complicated math and way more like an architect designing a skyscraper? I mean, think about it. It's a disciplined process, right? You need a master plan to create something that's really built to last. Let's dig into that blueprint.
For so many of us, investing feels like, well, a tangled mess. It's just a random collection of things we bought on a whim, maybe based on a hot tip, with no real guiding process. And that's like trying to build a house on sand. It's totally chaotic, you're always reacting to the latest news, and frankly, you're exposed to risks you probably don't even see coming.
So the whole point of this is to get you from that disorganized pile of assets to a really cohesive portfolio. We want to transform that random pile of building materials into a beautiful, structured design where every single piece has a job to do. That, right there, is the art and the science of portfolio management. So I want you to take a second and really think about this. What does your financial house look like right now? Is it just a random pile of materials, or is it a structure that's actually built to last? Keep that question in your head as we start exploring the blueprint together. Okay, so how do we actually build that structure? Well, just like any great building, a portfolio that's going to last starts with a master plan. This first phase, it's all about laying that financial foundation. We're creating the blueprint for your entire future.
And this whole process, it really follows the same logic a master architect would use. It unfolds in three main stages. First, you've got the planning step. That's where we lay the foundation. Then there's the execution step, where we actually construct the portfolio. And finally, you have the feedback step, which is all about monitoring the structure to make sure it stands strong.
Okay, it all kicks off with the planning stage. And honestly, this is arguably the most critical part of the whole process. Why? Because this is where you define your goals, you get real about market realities, and you lay the foundation for absolutely everything that follows. If you get this part right, trust me, the rest becomes so much easier. And this isn't some vague, abstract idea. It's a super clear four-step process. First up, you identify your investor profile. You got to understand your own goals and limits. That info then lets you create something called an investment policy statement, or IPS. Once you have that in hand, you can form some realistic expectations about the market, and finally, figure out your strategic asset allocation.
Right at the heart of this entire plan is the investment policy statement, the IPS. I want you to think of this as the official blueprint for your financial structure. It's the governing document for all your decisions. It's what keeps you disciplined when the markets get crazy, and it holds you accountable for every single move you make.
A great blueprint has to be realistic, right? And that means finding a balance. On one side, you have your objectives, what you want to achieve, like your return goals and how much risk you can stomach. But on the other side, you have your constraints, the real-world limits, like your time horizon, whether you need cash on hand, and of course, taxes. A really solid IPS brings both of those sides together in harmony.
All right, so we've got the blueprint in hand. Now it's time to break ground. We're moving out of the planning phase and into execution, turning that detailed design into a real-world portfolio. So this is the execution stage. This is where the blueprint really comes to life. We take our investment strategies, we integrate them with what we expect from the market, and we start selecting the specific assets, the actual stocks, bonds, and other things that are going to build our portfolio. And I absolutely love this way of thinking about it. Your strategic asset allocation, or SAA, that's the permanent foundation of your building. Think of it like the laws of physics for your structure. It doesn't change. But your tactical asset allocation, or TAA, that's more like adjusting the scaffolding or deciding when to open the windows to catch a breeze. These are temporary adjustments to take advantage of current conditions.
So to put it simply, your SAA is your long-term policy, the one that's set by your IPS. TAA, on the other hand, is where you make those short-term dynamic adjustments. For example, let's say your long-term plan is to have 60% in stocks. A tactical shift might mean you temporarily drop that to, say, 40% if you think the market is getting a bit overheated.
So once that allocation framework is set, it's time for security selection. This is just like an architect choosing the specific steel, glass, and concrete for the building. As you start picking individual assets, you've got to think about things like valuation, liquidity, and how each new piece is going to contribute to the overall diversification of your structure. Okay, so the structure is built. Awesome. But wait, the job isn't done. Not by a long shot. The best architects know that a building needs constant maintenance and inspection to make sure it stands strong for decades. And guess what? The exact same thing is true for your portfolio.
And that brings us to the final and maybe most important phase, the feedback stage. The key thing to get here is that this is not an endpoint. It is a continuous, ongoing loop of monitoring your portfolio, rebalancing it when needed, and evaluating its performance. This is how you make sure the structure is always aligned with your original blueprint.
And here is where you can see how it all connects. The process flows from planning to execution, but it doesn't just stop there. See that feedback loop? It's constantly sending information from your monitoring and performance evaluation right back to the planning stage. It's a living, breathing, dynamic cycle of disciplined management.
So we've walked through the entire process now, from the initial blueprint all the way to long-term upkeep. Now, let's boil it all down to the core principles, the simple, actionable rules that every master builder of wealth should live by.
And just remember, the goal here isn't to build some static monument that you just walk away from. The goal is to cultivate a living, breathing structure that's designed for enduring growth, a dynamic mix of assets that can truly stand the test of time.
So what are the timeless principles behind all this? Well, it really just comes down to two things: discipline and awareness. Be disciplined by starting early, diversifying your assets, and contributing regularly. And be aware of your strategic goals, aware of the impact of taxes, and aware of what's happening in the world around you. Your financial compass works best when you actually know how to read it.
So, if you take one thing away, let it be this. Your portfolio is not a static monument. It is a living structure that you have to tend to, adapt, and maintain. So the only question left is, what kind of structure are you going to build?